it's not appropriate for me to even start with the peace greeting. Austin Holloman, I'm not endorsing fornication because I'm a Muslim, I'm not allowed to, but I am endorsing travel and I am endorsing black men having options. And you should, in fact, go see these other places. And you should see, at the very least, how these women do treat men better. Even if you weren't fornicating, you'd be able to see that. Now, if men want to marry, it is still proven that it is better for men to go to Colombia and marry in Colombia, or to go to Brazil and marry in Brazil. It is proven that it is better for men to do this. What you said was very true. The difference between them and the Western woman is that if they like you, and they're not worried about what their friends say. And that makes all the difference. See, Austin, you've had women leave notes on your car and then act funny when you call them for two reasons. One, they may have left notes on other guys' cars too, and they weren't sure exactly who it was that was calling them. Number two, but that's not as likely. But number two, they have to compete with each other. And while you may have the look that they like, there's still an element of very stiff competition with each other. And this means that they can be disapproved of for not playing games with guys like you. And so, plus they're just spoiled for choice. As I've stated, we men have made things entirely too easy in the West. And you're right. Men in the West need to leave Western women alone. Things will not get better until the day that en masse more Western men start doing it. And you've accelerated that message. You see, Kevin Samuels did not. But now you come up and you've gone from 86 to 8,000 plus subscribers in weeks or maybe months. You certainly surpassed me, and I'm glad you have. Within a few more days, you will have 3 times my subscriber count, I'm sure. You're telling men, listen, gentlemen, stop messing with them. Don't even smash and dash. Leave them alone. And see, now this means that men have no reason to do any of the other things that these women would want from us. And I'm telling you, Mr. Holloman, trust me when I say this. All these games they're playing on you, they played on me starting 30 years ago. 25 years ago, they were still doing it. 20 years ago, they were still doing it. They did it all the way up until I was out of the game as a married Muslim. And then, even in a marriage, I found somebody doing that. So they started with guys like me. And I found out later that it was because of my racial ambiguity that they were doing it. They were also doing this to other guys for being things like good readers, reading at grade level, reading at age level, things like that, not being the stereotype. They've since then expanded the types of men on whom they play these games to where they're now playing them even on guys like you that are at least visually select. And then you got these matriarchal mandingo niggas holding live streams talking about you, trying to tell you that your game is just weak. How do these ninjas know anything about your game? They don't, sir. They have no clue. Except for one thing, and that is that men by default aren't going to have game because that's manipulation, and that's not something that people start off with. That's one of their first go-tos because they believe in manipulating broads, which is actually a very gynocentric way to think, because women want to be able to say that they've been manipulated and deceived and didn't know any better and didn't have to know any better and therefore not accountable. They always want to be able to say that. And game is something that gives them that. It makes that excuse for them. And these men are sitting up here saying that they should have to do that. You should have to do that because you, and the women like it because they can retain plausible deniability. That's one thing they always want. And I say, when it comes to adult women, you don't give them plausible deniability. Well, you seem to agree because you go into areas and you found it in areas where women don't try to retain plausible deniability. You can treat them better. The Western woman wants to retain it because it's a type of power. It holds the victim narrative intact. They can always go to it later. I thought he was, oh, fuck the shuck up. You didn't think he was that. If you thought he was that, you wouldn't have given him a chance. You probably would have never even noticed him. And would have been irritated and annoyed at his approach. His approach, let alone anything else. And this is something we know. And frankly, I think that these ladies need to realize that. That we now know what they're doing. And so Locario actually appeals to them. As much as the women may not like the idea of a man teaching non-select guys how to manipulate them, they don't really care about that much. When they really start thinking about it, they would rather that than you sit up here and start telling men, you know what, scrap all of that, get a passport. And for the flight of a cross-country flight, for the price of a cross-country flight, you can go to Brazil and be treated so much better. See, that's what they really don't want. That really gets to them more than Locario coming along and saying, hey, you know what? Spend your money on me instead, and I'll teach you how to game these broads. Manipulate them. I mean, the women don't really want you spending your money or your limited money on him instead of on her, but it still beats telling men to not even go to them and to not even approach them and to ignore them. So you continue with that message. Not a fornication. I'm not telling you to continue that. You'll do that independently of me. Or if you choose to not do it, you will stop doing it independently of me. But in terms of telling men about the options abroad, how much better it gets from friendships to actual marriage. These men still need to know that they're not necessarily right off the bat going to be ill-treated. Because see, what you're dealing with in the United States is contempt. It's a sentiment that you owe them and they owe you nothing. And then you go into Brazil and the sentiment is that either there's a give and take or there's nothing. At the very least, it's fair. So what these guys are sitting trying to tell you that these women are gaming you when you go to these other countries. What they fail to point out is that they're playing, if it's a game, the same game superiorly. What you had to tell them was that at the very least it's a give and take what you're dealing with outside the West, and you go back into the West and what you're dealing with is the only give and take is that you give and she takes. We have to listen to broads, nasty broads, talk about the disposability of males because we're males and just how bad we are. That's what we get in the States. That broad that said, I woke up to this stuff. She's trying to talk like she just woke up before she started recording. So she woke up with a weave like that and that makeup on. She woke up like that. No, she fixed herself up and then turned the camera on to herself and recorded that. And then want to sit up and say that men are disposable, but then she wanted to talk to black men. She was saying black men are disposable. And she was saying that only because we tend to have less wealth than other men. And even then, that becomes debatable depending on where we live. In the Gulf, you got black citizens. They don't have less money than others. In the United States, more of us are moving up into the middle class. There are some ethnic groups that have less than us on average, others that have more. But there was a time we were the face of poverty. And because of that, she's upset that she comes from the same race as us. And that's all that is. Failing to realize that that last place in many categories actually only applies to them. Last chosen, they and Asian men are the least chosen. Absolutely, they're the least chosen. Whereas we tend to be the second most off-chosen man. At least in the States. And in the Gulf too, it seems to be. So a lot of sisters are just upset about that, that's all. And so they're angry and they want to say to black men, you're disposable. N-word. This is what we got to deal with in the States. I'm going to tell you now, That African Brazilian woman is not talking like this, neither to white men nor to us. That Dominican is not talking like this to white men nor to us. And they could be some of the nastiest game players, but that's not how they're talking to us. No. What you're dealing with is a situation that is very peculiar, not to the American black woman, but to Western black women. And mark my words when I tell you she got it from someone else. And there's a video I put up on Facebook, not YouTube, but I shared it on Facebook, in which a woman that appears to be of Indian origin talks about her black boyfriend as an it. Other women have learned, certain other women who come from groups that look down on us as a whole have learned some of these same things. This Indian woman pulls her black boyfriend into the frame and says that he's Nigerian, purebred, no crossbreeding. It cooks, it cleans. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, it doesn't cook. Yeah. Check it out on Facebook. So there are other women around the world that are no good for us in general. They're just not capable of even caring about our equality, our dignity, our humanity. But that's not everyone. And I want to say this to the peso man. If you think that it's okay for black men to travel to the continent, but not to Latin America, then that tells me right off the bat that there's something about Latin American women that are better than women from the continent. Now, I didn't think this at first. But when someone explained that this is your stance, and I heard you and Locario and read and saw what you all were saying, it dawned on me. There's something superior about the African Latina and maybe the non-African Latina. It's not the looks, not the phenotype. I got nothing against the way we look, but there's something about her that is superior to the sister from the continent. And chances are it's going to be the attitude, because, that is what we're trying to get away from. And that seems to be exactly what you think we should look for and demand in any woman. You seem to think that we should look for and demand that in any lady at all. And that if she doesn't have that nasty, filthy, funky, stereotypical attitude, that we should then just assume that we're just doing something so bad by not pursuing her and by not approaching her. That if that's, you're pretty much like those guys that say, well, I like a challenge and that's how I gauge myself. And it's the only way I gauge myself. But then you take it overboard to an extreme level to where you only judge yourself by the harshest judges and by that whatever you cannot do. And so therefore, none of your abilities and none of these things matter. None of your, you only judge yourself by the test you fail. And that's what you're like. And you want other men to feel the same way. It's like you're trying to ascend through the ranks of the military, but you always maintain the basic training mindset, where you internalize every nasty negative thing a drill sergeant says. That's a drill sergeant. He's not supposed to compliment you even when you're right. That's what you're telling other black men to do to themselves. Well, she's not difficult enough. She hasn't expressed enough hatred for you. So don't believe anything she says. You want to talk about some kind of ironclad confidence. You're actually teaching men the opposite. You don't even realize it. Austin, all that means is that it's time to be even more aggressive with what you're saying. Because I know Locario. I haven't met him personally, but I've been watching him for a few years. Dude's a pickup artist, trying to sell his course and books and all this other stuff to men so that they can wind up You're having to use game and manipulate women only to wind up in open marriages. And we already know when you have an open marriage, in many cases, unless the woman is old, in many cases, she's going to have more partners than the guy is, even when they get older. Oh yeah, I'm going to bring the ding-a-ling home, but the husband's got all the responsibilities. Yeah, she could be old and still get all these extra partners. And what's the husband going to do? Lakari he may say, well, you know, we're both doing that. And that may be true, but who's really indulging more? In most cases, it's going to be the wife. And this is what he's leading you to. And the peso man is pretty much saying, well, you can go to the continent. Why is he saying that? And it's true, there are a lot of guys that say, you know, these women really aren't any different. No, that's a lie. The nature their interests may be the same, but the ways they go about it are in fact very different. I know that, even though I don't know South America, I've never been. I know that the ways they go about it are very different. One of the ways I know this is because I've been married twice outside the West. Was spoiled both times. I'm still being spoiled in one of them. I hope this helps. Thanks for listening. Black heart, black mind, black out. And as always, black heterosexual non-select male power. Just because she doesn't like it, just because Lakari don't like it, just because Peso Man doesn't like it. Just because, what's her name, Renee Louisiana Red doesn't like it. Just because all these PUAs and game coaches don't like it. And black patriarchy until extinction of Judgment Day.